our health authorities are trying very hard to improve on those three T's. No? In terms of testing, I think our capacity has improved. In terms of tracing, I think they have now systematized the gathering of information from arrivals, no, from in the airport, and then three is treatment. The private sector has also donated equipment, medicine, and even provided additional wings to some hospitals, particularly public hospitals, to accommodate an overwhelmed health sector.
Hi guys, we are in for a treat. We have one of the greatest central bank officers here in the podcast. He's one of the reasons why the Philippines hit investment grade status. He was one of the firm believers that the Philippines would be an investment grade country. He's one of the reasons and the proponents also that we're seeing the Philippines banking system to be really strong. And now he's retired and he's going to share his insights on what's currently happening in this pandemic, what's currently happening in this new normal. I'd like you guys to welcome into this podcast retired Deputy BSP Governor Diwa Guinigundo. Before I begin with the questions, how's everything? How are you in this entire pandemic?
I'm quite busy because one, I'm writing 2 columns per week. One for the Manila Bulletin and the other for Business World. We're also busy with the building of our sanctuary.
Now, here's my question. So, a lot of the people watching the podcast are basically retail investors.
Yeah.
We are in a pandemic that no one has predicted, even from last year. For your own personal finances, what are you doing? Are you saving up a cash muna, or would you invest right now to take advantage of more cheaper opportunities?
I'm quite heavy on real estate, no? Both in terms of raw land and condominium. As you know, I'm retired. It's quite paradoxical in the sense that I'm retired, I'm past 65, so I should have short horizon. But I can go long in terms of real estate. No? In terms of my portfolio investment, I would rather hold more in terms of fixed investment. Basically, government securities as well as corporate papers. Of course, people would always have to be very careful in terms of selecting corporate papers, for example. And then one should also be aware that interest rates are not getting higher. They are following the lead of BSP, which has brought down the policy rate to just about 2.25%. So in the case of government papers, we can also expose ourselves to dollar-denominated government bonds. Since the equities market is also weak, while we're supposed to be opportunistic, I think we should also be very careful, especially in terms of the magnitude of our exposure. We should limit ourselves to those stocks or equities that we can explain the fundamentals, okay? If there are growth prospects, by all means, can take advantage of the situation. So in terms of liquidity, we can keep our money in bank deposits, those that can always be withdrawn and deployed in any of those possible investment outlets. Something that can also leverage on the situation today.
If you would advise your 35-year-old self in this condition, would you be more conservative right now or would you be more aggressive?
I think I can be more aggressive. Time is on your side. Because after all, we are driven by business cycle. I think it is also important that we should rely less on intuition and rely more on actual assessment of the markets, the growth prospects, the macroeconomy, and then look at the downsides and the upsides, risks.
Ako, I'm a big fan of the Philippines consumption-driven economy, and the way I invested also was following where the economy was. Now, because of this lockdown, because of this pandemic, consumption has been hit. Do you think we will recover from this?
I have always emphasized that the Philippines has what it takes to grow, and in these pandemic times to be able to recover for a number of reasons. One, we have a long history of growth, resiliency, and robustness. We have 21 years of uninterrupted economic growth. That's a big feat. I don't think many countries could also claim that kind of economic record. In short, in the last 20 years, we have done our homework. So I think in terms of whether we can bounce back, we can recover, and continue with our 21 years of economic growth, I think we can do it. But the problem is we are facing 4 handicaps. The first handicap, of course, is our public health management program. I think we need to improve further on the 3 T's, no? Testing, tracing, and treating. I think that's what is important. If we are able to provide some proof, the incidence of infection, instead of rising, starts flattening, and that the number of recoveries also starts going up, we would be able to lay down foundation of consumption-driven economic recovery. Second, I think it is important that the execution of these policies, it should be even. Okay? If you have an equal application of the law, people do not get confident about public policies. And if public policies do not enjoy public support, there is very little public ownership, chances are confidence in public policies will also be equally weak. And therefore, the effectiveness of public policy in, let's say, engineering an economic program for economic recovery will have a less chance of succeeding.
I'm sure you're one of the best people who can answer this. We've seen interest rates drop from 4.75% almost a year ago to 2.25% as of the time of this recording. This is one of the lowest interest rates that we've seen in a very, very long time. Do you think it's gonna go even lower given that there's still uncertainty in where we're headed?
Real interest rates is already negative. Right? June inflation rate was 2.5%. So that's already negative. January-June average was also 2.5. Therefore, in real terms, the policy rate is already negative. The forecast for 2020 is 2.3 and 2.6, I think, in 2021. Therefore, at 2.25, you have a negative real policy rate. Now, what's wrong with a negative real policy rate? Now, if your nominal interest rates have gone too low, because policy rates are also negative in real terms, you will have problems in terms of pricing of risks. You will also have problems with issues about liquidity. Okay, if there is excess liquidity, you might also be going into a possible asset inflation or asset bubble, and therefore issues about financial stability may also be raised. Once you have some semblance of recovery in domestic demand, that could also be inflationary. If your interest rates are just too low and negative in real terms, you will be penalizing savers and investors, even in corporate papers or in government securities or government bonds. But of course, the banks are happy because the BSP has released a lot of liquidity from the reserve requirements. Now, what we're hoping is that the banks would also be able to bring it down to the level of borrowers.
Japan, US, Europe, their interest rates have fallen either close to zero or negative. What's your take on that? And what do you think is the negative side if we go through that? And then US quantitative easing. Will we ever do that in the Philippines?
Well, in the first place, I think the BSP has time and again assured the markets, we have not run out of conventional monetary policy. We still have a lot of tools out there. One is, of course, reserve requirement. But reserve requirement, of course, will further infuse the market with more liquidity when we already have a lot of liquidity in the market. The banks can turn around and borrow from the central bank. So this is something I think that is open to government, both our finance people and the monetary authorities, instead of considering non-conventional or quantitative easing type of monetary policy. After all, some people are saying, well, the central bank has already provided 300 billion pesos worth of debt monetization to the national government. To me, this is not QE. This is not quantitative easing. This is not non-conventional or unorthodox monetary policy, because the BSP Charter is quite clear. There are limits to provisional advances by the central bank to the national government.
What if interest rates are so low pero yung mga negosyante, because of the uncertainty, takot rin sila humiram, or people will be scared to buy cars or houses to borrow money for it because they're scared baka hindi rin nila mabayaran because of all of the things that are happening right now? Is that
a very good point? Some people are saying, when monetary policy is being used in a situation where monetary policy will not matter, it's like pushing on a string. In a situation where there's a lot of uncertainties, where there are risks to business activities, a further expansion of monetary policy, further release of liquidity may not at all be effective.
I believe that we have one of the best banking systems, and our banks are very, very well equipped based on what's happening. But a lot of people have been asking, should defaults be a concern? A lot of the banks already have placed loan loss provisions as part of their disclosures to somehow put a buffer in it. But my question is that enough? As a person who's invested in banking stocks, or a person who has mutual funds that has exposure to banking stock, should there be a cause of alarm given that they're already expecting larger defaults coming this year?
It is part of risk management. If the situation is so precarious as this one, it is incumbent upon the banks to put up higher loan loss provisioning. Tama yun. I think wasto yung ginawang yun ng mga bangko dito sa Pilipinas. For whatever it is worth, I think it is important that they are prepared to do it. If this lockdown continues, if you have an atmosphere of fear, no matter how strong the banks are, there will be some difficulty amortizing their debts. But I think it is also important to realize that the Philippine banks continue to be strong in the sense that, one, their capital base remains above the international norms of 8%, and the BSP's regulatory capital of 10%. They have also put up their liquidity coverage ratio, also considered net stable funding ratio in their management of their books. In fact, there were upgrades by the credit rating agencies of many of our big banks. We should be encouraged by that.
Do you think we will ever come to a point that there will be massive defaults, or we will recover faster so that later on we will not have larger defaults? I know it was a different crisis in the 90s, but will we ever hit those levels?
It will depend on how our health authorities are able to flatten the curve. I think our economic managers have done a good job in putting together an economic recovery program. Meron ka man na 4-pillar strategy. If this lockdown continues because of our failure to arrest this health problem, then the national government will have to extend providing conditional cash transfer or cash transfer, wage support, support to small businesses. And that costs money. Now, because of the lockdown, taxes are not forthcoming because business is down. Under the Constitution, you cannot have a supplemental budget using borrowings. So we will be in a bind when this thing continues to extend. The government will have some challenges raising the funding for the economic stimulus, which is now more than 1.5 trillion pesos, or between 8 to 9% of GDP. But assuming that we're able to do this, let's say by the end of July or August, the likelihood of the economic recovery becomes bigger.
You mentioned something about the stimulus. Should we drag on to somehow next year? Will this still be sustainable, or will we be in bigger trouble if the lockdowns continue to extend up until next year?
I hope it doesn't extend to next year. Our health authorities are trying very hard to improve on those 3 things. In terms of testing, I think our capacity has improved. In terms of tracing, I think they have now systematized the gathering of information from arrivals, from in the airports, and then 3 is treatment. The private sector has also donated equipment, medicine, and even provided additional wings to some hospitals, particularly public hospitals, to accommodate an overwhelmed health sector.
Everything will boil down to the health issue being addressed before we go back to normal.
1 or 2 months after the initial lockdown on March 15, people are already talking about, let's open up the economy, let's open up business, etc., etc. Unless we put more resources to addressing this health issue. Sayang lang yung mga gagawin natin sa opening up. Look at what happened to Sweden. Look at what happened to even China, only to find out that there was another outbreak. So they locked down again. Now, we don't want that to happen to the Philippines. I'm not saying that we should not open up the economy. We should open up the economy with the full recognition that the virus is still out there, it is still infectious. While we're trying to open up in the economy, we must intensify on the healthcare.
What's your advice for people who are going through this for the first time? Either a lot of people who lost their jobs, a lot of businesses that got hit. After seeing things recover also, what can you advise Filipinos in this era?
It is going to be a very impossible situation, Marvin, because if you lost your business, you lost your job, everything, what is left of you is probably your goodwill, your reputation, your comfort. Is that you did not lose because of bad management. You did not lose because of hanky-panky in conducting your business. As I was saying earlier, I think we should be open to looking at different business propositions. Those business propositions that could promise a new business model that can thrive in an economic lockdown, in a situation where physical contact is minimized. So IT-related businesses, I think, is a very good one. So this is the best time to borrow clean from your friendly banks. So and then start all over again.
The first time I met you was 2012. You were speaking, and you were very, very inspiring on the way you would approach things and the way you would see things. A lot of people right now are also depressed, they're anxious, they're scared, they don't know also what to do. Some of them, maybe their finances were hit, or their OFWs that have returned home. Any words of encouragement naman for them, especially for those who are at the point where they don't know what's happening in their lives and in their finances as well?
If you are down, there's no other direction but up. Okay, that's one. Two, it is important that you find challenges, an opportunity to make better decisions, consider better options, and pursue those options. Somebody said that if there is no door of opportunity, why not create your own door? Okay? And then open it yourself. Okay? And then, of course, I always believe in the power of prayer. Okay? There's nothing that cannot be accomplished if we pray. Things that are impossible with men are always possible with God. That's the reason why the Philippines decided in the 1987 Philippine Constitution to show and to say that we implore the aid of the Almighty God. That is in the preamble of the Constitution. And even in terms of the 6 denominations of our currencies, we put there, pinagpala ang bayan, ang Diyos ay ang Panginoon. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. If we dedicate anything or everything that we do to our Lord, our God, there's no way by which we can fail. Do your job, do it with greatest amount of diligence. I think that is something that with which you can look forward to a brighter and better future.
How can people see your columns? What day, what publication, and then also your online streaming for your sermons as well?
Manila Bulletin comes out every Thursday, and then Business World every Friday. We put up our messages during Sundays in the POSIM, Fullness of Christ International Ministries website. We do it at 9 o'clock in the morning. So now that we are in the pandemic, our focus is basically on that, how leadership can attain success. So it's something that I think we need to think about.
Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Diwa Guinigundo. Thank you. And I hope you guys got a lot from all of this. And what we're doing here is we're giving you data information so that when you handle your money, also when you invest or whatever you do with it, you're not basing it on emotion, but you're basing it on the numbers, on logic. Because what beats uncertainty is you knowing what you're getting into as well. So thank you so much. And to everyone watching, feel free to put in your questions in the comment section. we can make more videos on top of that as well. So thank you, and I hope this video helps you trade well, trade strong, trade smart. See you all again soon, and God bless you all.